All right. Well, greetings to everybody. Shalom to each and every one of you. I hope that you are on a journey of finding truth and peace, and there's many, many things that go with that. Uh, Lots of teachings that are coming out that bring some balance to maybe the different sides that you hear about. But we're gonna pick back up in the Nag Hammadi and the Apocryphon of John today. Uh, this is really intense and quite huge. There's going to be some stuff that we read today, as well as many other days, that it might be a little difficult for you to make sense of. But I would like to say that many of the metaphors that you took as literal teachings in the Bible are really corrupted metaphors from mysticism that preceded Christianity. If you've been with me on Wednesday nights, you know that it's very clear that the Essenes, from Saudi's perspective, were very mystical, very psychic, very spiritual people, but they weren't religious. And some of the things that you see come up that you don't even get their names in the New Testament because they don't use them were people that were actually in the area and functioning, but they weren't quote unquote of Judaism like the Pharisees or the Sadducees were. So it's really, as a famed band Aerosmith says, it to a large extent it really is the same old song and dance. There's truth, and then there's deception. And we found out last week that Yeshua was attacked when John first is going to the temple. He's attacked because he was deceiving people, because not because he wasn't teaching the truth, but because he was contrary to their traditions. And so we should really, especially in the really special time that our society exists in, I think you guys can clearly see that even in the front of us, we have two traditions that are fighting for the control of the minds of the people in America. We have an agenda that if it's allowed to go on in our public schools, if it's allowed to go on in our sports world, if it's allowed to go on all levels, the narrative and what society is 10 years from now will not even remotely resemble. And the problem with that mental sickness is that it is worse than cancer. The spread rate of it is extremely fast. And then you throw in a few AI things that are already not but a couple of years away from being something that's readily available in our society. So we really, whether you know it or not, we really do live in some pretty precarious times. And I do believe that we are on the precipice between one choice, one decision, which is, as you saw last week, ethical virtue, and the other is basically, for lack of better words, no morality at all. And that is the choice that this country, the crossroads that we're at. Some will make a compact with the devil, and others will choose to walk the narrow line. And so I think, as it always is, inevitably you have to be the one who does that. And please don't let any of us take for granted the freedom to make a decision, but also to understand that those decisions have very massive cause and effect. So shalom to each and every one of you. Source is so amazing. He loves us, and he loves us in ways we probably can't even deal with. We don't fully understand, for those of you dinosaurs like myself that came out of old Christianity, I know that it's difficult to understand a God that loves you even though you make mistakes. Now, the question I think that remains is he okay with the mistakes we made, and is there any price for us to pay? And of course, as we looked at the Kabbalion, we find that there is always a price to pay for your decision. Whether it be a good price or a bad price is totally up to you. So we are blessed, whether we accept it or recognize it or not, though. This is a unique experience. It boggles my mind to think that I've been here before, and yet, as many other people, I've had many encounters when I realized that just this last week, it was almost like I watched a time shift go on. And there were some things, very, very distinct things that happened that made me go, this isn't the time I've been living in. And I think that if we begin to understand the spiritual realm a little more, it's really not as difficult to get into those places as we might think it is. But we do have a lot of baggage and a lot of garbage blocking between us and truth. So peace and shalom to each and every one of us. How about we do this? We come to Heart Center, it's called, and then we just simply submit ourselves to each other with a namaste. And so we left off last week. Last week was huge. I hope it was for you. It's always huge when I see, and it seems like no matter how much I read, more of the picture, it gets clear when you go back and read it again. That's why I try to read this stuff multiple times, because it's just like Source adds a new layer every time you read it again. And so we're going to take off in an explanation for you guys. Let's say this might not line up with the Genesis that you grew up knowing. Once again, understanding that the truth of Genesis is that it is nothing but a metaphor. Humans lived 20,000 years before the so-called Adam lived. So if Adam was the progenitor of all humanity, then we got a major problem that they have proof of humanity 20,000 years ago. There's could be multiple different answers, and both of them being right. But irrespective of that discussion, the story of Genesis is nothing but a story. And so we're going to pick up where we left off last week, which is Barbello appears. Now I realize if you're a Christian, you don't know, come here from Sikkim, about Barbello. Probably have never heard the name before, although there are other in mystic contexts that have. So it was present in their teaching, their ideologue, and so let's see a different perspective of what spirit creation might actually look like, and what does it mean? How does it affect the world that exists around us? Barbello appears. The Father is the one who beholds himself in the light surrounding him, which is the spring of living water, and it provides all the realms. So he is the light that surrounds him, and he is the spring of living water. How does that help us? Well, we know that Yeshua tells us, out of us will flow streams of living water. Was he saying that there's going to come to be a point to where we can walk around and we open the faucet and water runs out of us? I mean, on a literal concept, if you are a very literalist, then you have to come to that thought process that that's what he was talking. Out of your belly will flow rivers of living water. But we see that this predates the lie of Christianity. And so they were already talking about all of these things that were in the Bible were, at a large level, were already known thought processes, and what those thought processes were are not the thought process you were taught by Christianity in the Bible. That's the main problem I have with Christianity. I have no problems with Christians. I was one. The problem I have is that the words are so corrupt, and the best way to sow corruption is to mix it with truth, so that neither the scholar or the lesser will know the difference. And so the Father is the one who beholds himself in the light that surrounds him. So we can take this and we can go, well, when we pray to the Father, who are we praying for? We're praying to the one that's in the middle of the light. Many people in near-death experiences have encountered being in the presence of God, though they never saw him. What they did see is the light that's spoken of here. And so when you have documents that are 5,000 years old and they're telling what their story, which hasn't been taught to most Americans, identicals what people are experiencing in near-death experiences in the year 2025. You have to then go, for all this 2,000 years, Christianity had control of everything. All of a sudden, nobody recognized that they were walking in spiritual things and there were spiritual things going on. Why? Because they did not want you to understand the spirit realm, or you would have inevitably left them. And so, he says, the Father is the one who beholds himself in the light surrounding him, which is the spring of the living water. So, let's get this. The Father is the light, and the light is what is supposed to come out of us. So you can also take that in proper context, and you can say, dear friends, every one of us are supposed to be letting the light of God come from us, to flow out of us. See, the concept that we have sometimes is that all of the blessings are supposed to flow into us. That's God's purpose, is God wants to bless me. God doesn't want to bless you near as much as he wants you to bless other people. See, it's not supposed to come and make you fat like a tick so you pop. It's supposed to come in, and as it comes in, it's supposed to then leave in a flow. That's why you hear people talking about go with the flow. Don't try to force things. Just let things happen. And oftentimes we want to orchestrate and control things. Most humans in today's society are at minimum control freaks. They want to control everything. They want to tell everybody what to do. And unfortunately that feels real good, but it doesn't work worth a crap. Okay? It's not my job to make you God's child. It's your job to. And if you choose not to do it, that was a decision you made. And so the spring of living water provides all the realms. So it wasn't just something that came here. There is a much bigger implicit picture of what this spring of water, and while we don't get details about that, if it involves all realms, there are many realms, friends. This is the least one. The realm of humanity in which we live in is the lowest form of existence that there is. And so it comes from light all the way down through the 10 realms to humanity last. And he reflects on his image everywhere. So do you see really what the calling to mankind is that you reflect the image of God everywhere. Wow. I don't know about you guys, but I feel woefully humbled right now to recognize that that is the highest calling that we can ever exude. So he reflects on his image everywhere, sees it in the spring of the Spirit, and becomes enamored of his luminous water. Wow. So we got a lot of stuff right there packed up in that one little statement, but I will say this to you. The spring is the Spirit, and the water is light, and even Source is enamored with it. If he can be enamored with his own light because of the great beauty of it, wow, that's pretty profound, and we'll look at that more as it goes on. And why is he enamored with it? And he becomes enamored of his luminous water, for his image is in the spring of pure luminous water that surrounds him. His thought became a reality, and she who appeared in his presence in shining light came forth. She is the first power who preceded everything. So that's pretty crazy, because you'll begin to see a picture that it never was Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That was concocted by the Christian church to control you. The picture you're going to see here is that it was Father, Mother, and everything else. And so his thought became a reality, and she who appeared in his presence in shining light came forth. So she was, the mother was nothing but a thought. What an amazing concept if we would realize that our thoughts today, and I know many people write off this belief system because it sounds too far-fetched, that no matter who you are or what you're going through, and I struggle with this, and I'm finding T9C pieces of peace with it. But no matter what is going on in your life, good or bad, you're causing it. And when you begin to think and understand, and all of this is going to be about what I'm speaking about, but when you begin to think and understand whether you recognize the creative power that we as humans have, made in his image, and that he does nothing but think something, and it is created, and as it is above, so it is below. And the picture here, friend, metaphorically, is whatever your life is, you created it in your mind. Whatever it is. Good, bad, indifferent, you created it simply by your thoughts. Just like he creates simply by his thoughts. And so he reflects on his image everywhere. He's everywhere. There's no place he isn't, because he is everything. He is every human all at once. We are all one, just simply a thought of Creator. And he reflects on his image everywhere, sees it in the spring of the Spirit, and becomes enamored of his luminous water, for his image is in the spring of pure luminous water surrounding him. His thought became a reality, and she who appeared in his presence, shining light, came forth, simply from him thinking of something. She is the first power who preceded everything and came forth from his mind as the forethought of the all. So all says, I'm not going to need her right now, but at some point I'm going to need her. That's the concept of a forethought. So he created her before she was necessary. What an all-knowing source that knows what's needed. Don't we hear that in the Bible, that God has knowledge of what you need before you what? Before you even ask. Those words are not contrary in proper context to what I just read to you about the very first creation, which was Barbello. She is the first power who preceded everything and came forth from his mind as the forethought of the all. When we do not use forethought, we are not exhibiting the thoughts of our source, of our Creator. And we've been so dumbed down and brainwashed in America. Thank you, President Trump, for hopefully totally destroying the education system. And maybe it'll come back with some integrity where there is once again forethought about what the purpose of education is. You might not think that they're together, but they're totally together. What's going on in this earth and what sources, plans, and purposes are, I promise you, are meshing. And Barbello was the first power who preceded everything, and she came forth from his mind as the forethought of the all. Her light shines like the Father's light. So she's now been created. She's not the Father, but she shines like him. What does Yahusha tell us? We are not the Father, but we are the Father. And for many people, that's difficult for their mind. Her light shines like the Father's light. She, the perfect power, is the image of the perfect and invisible Virgin Spirit. Do you know that it is actually in reality, and you're going to find this out in a minute, that there was an immaculate conception, but it had nothing to do with Jesus being born on this earth? Nothing. So, you get a picture here, all of a sudden we've got this keyword called virgin. And then the next one you'll find out what the virgin in the Bible is metaphorically referring to. It's referring to the virgin spirit, not to the human body. That's why Saudi tells you he was never known to be anything except a human. It wasn't his body. It wasn't the Jesus born in Bethlehem that was the spirit. It was him that exists in that body. And when we begin to understand that that is exactly the picture in which we exist, whether we know or accept it, does not change the reality of that. If you choose to live in your lower base self and be a carnal human being, you have the right to do so because of free will. If you choose not to do that, you also have a right because of free will to no longer stay in your base carnality. But you must choose not to, or you will remain there. That's what true spiritualism is. And so his thought became a reality, and she appeared in his presence in shining light form. She is the first power who preceded everything and came forth from his mind as the forethought of the all. Her light shines like the Father's light. She, the perfect power, is the image of the perfect invisible virgin spirit. She, the first. And I think it's very appropriate that we grab a hold of that. This concept totally wipes out a whole lot of false doctrine that is being taught. She was the first creation. Wow, that's pretty huge in light of what our society has told us. She, the first power, the glory of Barbello, the perfect glory amongst the aeons. And we haven't read some. I've actually avoided some of the teachings because I'm just not sure that it's going to be something that is fruitful. There are some of these works that you must be pretty deep in understanding before you ever get anything, or you'll just walk away confused and you haven't gained any increase. And so the first power, the glory of Barbello, the perfect glory amongst the aeons, and we will in fact go through what the true aeons. Actually, if you'll think about it, Yeshua uses that word in I believe the 28th chapter of Matthew, but it's not interpreted the way that it should have been. And the glory of revelation, and she glorified and praised the virgin spirit, for because of the spirit she had come forth. She is the first thought, the image of the Spirit. She became the universal womb. That's where all of the Immaculate Conception stuff comes from, friend, and it's a metaphor. This is the literal of the invisible manifestation of the metaphor. You were supposed to recognize this came from purity. But it didn't have anything to do with Mary because we know she had at least 6 kids. She is the first thought, the image of the Spirit. She became the universal womb, for she precedes everything. There's a piece of this that you can accept and maybe kind of tie. You know, you can ask yourself, how did the American Indian, and you'll find out that their belief system is infinitely closer truth than what we have known. But how did they know to call the earth the first place for humans, mother, and call the Great Spirit the Father? You understand that they're speaking of these two that we speak of here. This isn't new. If you want to, it's funny the devastation to the American Indians that we did, white man Christians did when they came in and beat them by force into submission to a whole pact of lies, that they were purer in spirit than any Christian probably ever will be. And it had nothing to do with rules. It had to do with one thing that ruled the whole thing: ethical virtue. There was a hierarchy, and if you don't break that hierarchy, you will remain safe. If you do get outside of it, it will cause you problems. And that's always been the plan. And that will be the plan that we return to, or we will be destroyed. She is the first thought, the image of the Spirit. She became the universal womb, and she precedes everything. The mother, father, the first human, the Holy Spirit, the triple male, the triple power, the androgynous one with three names, the aeon among the invisible beings. So now we have a picture that's painting for you, though you may not understand it, that there are other beings that were created, that were effective, that were functioning on this earth a long time before humanity was ever thought about. Spirit beings. The first to come forth. Barbelo asked the invisible virgin spirit to give her foreknowledge. Funny that this first one created that was light and that was sources luminous light, that the first thing she would ask the virgin spirit to bring forth was forethought. And how far forethought is from our reality. Very seldom are very many people hung up on forethought. What's going to happen if? What's going to happen if? What's going to happen if I make this decision? That's forethought. Before you make the decision, not you make a decision and then you find out what's going to happen. Those things are totally contrary. This all ties in also with the perfect human, because I believe that a pattern is going to be shown to us of how to totally radicalize and change our lives, and it's probably not what you think it is. Certainly not speaking in tongues, which is supposed to be how the Spirit shows that you're special. So Barbelo asked the invisible virgin spirit to give her foreknowledge, and the spirit consented. When the spirit consented, foreknowledge appeared and stood by forethought. So now we have functioning in humanity two of the most important things after the first being, the woman, was created. What do we have? We have forethought and we have foreknowledge. So we need to think about things, and then with that thinking about things, we also need to think about what that means. So it's not enough just to go, well, I thought about it. So this is the one who came from the thought of the invisible virgin spirit. Once again, the whole Immaculate Conception is all over this stuff. They did believe that, but they didn't believe the Immaculate Conception of the modern Bible. Foreknowledge glorified the Spirit and the Spirit's perfect power. Barbelo, for because of her foreknowledge, had come into being. She asked again to give incorruptibility, and the Spirit consented. And one of the things as we go through these that I would love for all of us maybe to try to get a little bit of a revelation is that if you'll notice, everything that she asked for is virtuous and is for the benefit of everyone, and the answer is always the same. Yes. When the Spirit consented, incorruptibility appeared and stood by thought and foreknowledge. Incorruptibility glorified the invisible one and Barbelo. Because of her, they had come into being. Barbelo asked to be given life eternal, and the invisible spirit consented. So isn't it quite amazing that life eternal was gifted to everything that would be created by Source from almost the very beginning? So life eternal for us has been explained in one concept. The other concept is exactly what I've been telling you guys. We've always been eternal. That was a lie to put you in fear. That was a lie to hold you captive. You're going to live. I promise you, you can be scared to death to go to hell, but when your body dies and your spirit leaves it, it ain't dead. So you can live your whole life fearing what's going to happen after you die because you really haven't died. That is a false statement. We should say that I'm curious as to what's going to become of me or what it will look like once my physical body dies, because this is not me. This is my house. And so she asked again to be given incorruptibility. So far, the three most virtuous things come from your mind and your behavior. Seems pretty ethically virtuous to want a good mind and to know how to behave. And she asked again to be given incorruptibility, and the spirit consented. That dang spirit, man. Incorruptibility appeared, stood by thought and foreknowledge. I love that, because we begin to see that all of these things were brought together. They're not enemies. The things that are enemies to these things are the things like lack of thought. No foreknowledge. Well, where does foreknowledge come from? Foreknowledge comes from the spirit realm. So if you have no foreknowledge, you're not functioning in the spirit realm. You can't be. Because it's part. It was created. It was given consent by the Holy Spirit that you have foreknowledge. You know why you don't understand that? Because you have no intuition that you have practiced and used and been mindful of so that you could have foreknowledge. You understand foreknowledge is supernatural. It comes before something happens. When people say, well, I saw this and this is going to happen, and then boom, it happens, that's actually the perfect manifestation of foreknowledge. And so incorruptibility appeared, and you see that they're together. These entities that are being given are not separated. They're not contrary to each other. And if you will stop for a minute and ponder this, you can find that all of these things are capable of existing in you, but there's one thing that impedes them. You know what that is, right? That one thing that impedes them is you. And so, incorruptibility glorified the visible one, the invisible one, who is who? Is Source. And Barbello, the first creation, the woman, the womb. You have to have a womb. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? You have to have a womb. And because of her, they had come into being. Barbello asked to be given life eternal, and the invisible spirit consented. When the spirit consented, life eternal appeared. And they stood together and glorified the invisible spirit and Barbello. And that's always going to be the concept. So it's not that we glorify anymore just the invisible spirit. When you begin to get in a deep metaphysical state of whether it just be deep contemplation, and I hope that you guys have moments where you are moved into tears with the overwhelming reality of how much Source has blessed us. But I believe that the American Indians, once again, are infinitely more perfect than what we are, because they don't just glorify Father, they value Mother Earth at a level very equal to Spirit Father. And why? Because they knew this without any of these writings. So it is possible to simply function in a spirit realm where none of this that we have is necessary. The Spirit will give this to you. The only way we can attain that is to go away from all society. which is why you find Paul going away for 3 years in the mountains and he comes back a different person. Why Elijah went to the mountains away. Why Yeshua got away from every human being that there was, because if you're around humans, there are people sowing doubt into your life. There are people here, whether you recognize it or not, that are sowing doubt against me simply because you don't believe that any of this stuff is true. And your doubts they have a power. Just like good aura makes people feel, bad aura makes people feel. And so Barbello asked to be given eternal life, so it's obvious that Father desires us to have that. And what did they do? They then glorified. I think we should do a lot more glorifying, probably if you want to benefit in your personal realm. Source and our Mother Earth for being the womb of us. And she asked again to be given truth. So truth and the recognition of truth is actually a spiritual gift. And the invisible spirit consented. Truth appeared, and they stood together and glorified the good invisible spirit and its Barbello. Because of her, they had come into being. These are the 5 aeons of the Father. Okay? They are the first human, the image of the invisible spirit that is forethought, which is Barbello and thought, along with foreknowledge, incorruptibility, life eternal, and truth. Look what Source provided for all of us before there ever was a human being. You don't think they haven't held you in captivity your whole life? Did they teach you that? Did they teach you that God, one of the 4th thing that he gave was eternal life? No, you were failing woefully trying to attain eternal life that you already possessed. I don't know about you. I call that a travesty. And so these are the 5 androgynous eons, which are the 10 aeons, which is the Father. Now, I think a simplified version, not that I'll explain it, but maybe it'll help you. You could almost take this concept as being the 10 facets of God. Okay, these aeons. We'll get into it more, and it's very deep, and as I said, I've kind of avoided it because we got too much base groundwork that we need before we jump in, but we will get there. And if it's 10 years, who cares? What are you in a hurry to do? And so these are the 5 androgynous eons. Well, we have to define then these 5 eons are androgynous. What is your knowledge and understanding of the word androgynous would determine what that means to you. Which are the 10 aeons, which is the Father. Barbello conceives. Now we have the virgin, now we have conception. Does that sound like immaculate conception to you in the spirit realm? The Father gazed into Barbello with the pure light surrounding the invisible spirit and his radiance. You see there that spirit is being denoted as masculine. Barbello conceived from him, and he produced a spark of light similar to the blessed light, but not as great. I will tell you, dear one, this is a heartbreaking thing, but I hope you guys will open your minds up. What I just read to you is for anyone who is a spiritual person and has a heart to know what ethical virtue is. That statement that I just read to you tells you when the conception of life begins. There is no okay abortion. None. Look at this. The Father gazed into Barbello with the pure light surrounding the invisible spirit and his radiance. Barbello conceived from him, and he produced a spark. Now, I will tell you, if you haven't researched it, science has proven that the millisecond that sperm fertilizes an egg, they have actually isolated this spark, and that there is a spark that goes on inside of an egg almost instantaneously the minute that egg is fertilized. So the only way that egg cannot be aborted or called an abortion is when a woman drops it from her womb because it was not properly fertilized. There are many beliefs, mystic beliefs of the past, who understand that the drop of semen, one drop of semen is the spark of God. And the minute that egg is fertilized, anything you do to that fetus after that is murder. I'm sorrowful, but that is the truth. And we have people giving their kids pills so they can kill God. Wow. And so Barbello conceived from him. She was supernaturally, spiritually impregnated by the spark of God, the same one that created you. And he produced a spark of light similar to the blessed light, but this also explains who we are in reference to source. It was the exact same spark, but it was not as bright, it was not as powerful, it was not as large as the spark that source is. That's why we are all the same, because every one of us were sparked by the Spirit of God when we were in an egg and fertilized by sperm. This was the only child of the mother-father that had come forth. This one spark. The only offspring, the only child of the Father, the pure light. Why did he come? To tell us that we are the light of the world. How did he know we were the light of the world? I tell you today, dear one, the spirit that existed in a body 2,000 years ago, called by human words Yeshua, was that light. You have to know, you have to be something to tell someone truly what it is. He was light in the purest form. The spirit that had probably been on this earth thousands of times under other names. And guess what? He's going to come back again. And if you're waiting for some Middle Eastern guy to come back with long brown hair and a beard, you're going to probably be waiting till the end of time, which never it comes. So, this was the only child of the mother and father. There only was one immaculate conception, and it was spiritual. You hear that? There have been, in humanity, there have been 7 different written documents over 7,000 years, friends, painting their humans that existed to this story. They had the story of the Immaculate Conception all the way back 7,000 years ago in Egypt. And when you stop and realize that we have documentation, verified proof that humanity has been alive for 22,000 plus years, you can see that that same story has just been brought in new manifestation, depending on the people possessing the knowledge, from 22,000 years ago to today. The truth once again gets spoken. That's why the truth never changes. And so this was the only child of the mother-father that had come forth, the only offspring, the only child of the Father, the pure light. The invisible virgin spirit rejoiced over the light that was produced, that came forth from the first power of the Spirit's forethought, who is Barbello. The Spirit anointed it with his goodness. Now, for those of you who are all hung up in the whole Christian concept about, in Greek versus Hebrew, friend, an anointed person is an anointed person. You can call him the Christ, you can call him the Mashiach. It's the same thing. It's simply anointed. We have a picture because Moses anointed his brother Aaron and Moses was anointed, that it means somebody who came and they poured oil on him. That's nothing but a dead metaphor for what happened in the spirit realm thousands of years before humanity existed. Yet again, another metaphor that destroys the lie of Christianity. The invisible spirit rejoiced over the light that was produced, that came forth from the first power of the Spirit's forethought, who is Barbello. The Spirit anointed it with his own goodness until it was perfect, with no lack of goodness, since it was anointed with the goodness of the invisible Spirit. So go ask a scholar, what was Yeshua capable of being counted as the Mashiach or as the Christ, or more appropriately in both, the Anointed One? And I promise you won't one of them probably explain what I just read to you. You now have excelled most of the scholars that exist that have studied ancient texts for thousands of years. The child stood in the presence of the Spirit as the Spirit anointed the child. So what was he anointed? The term of oil is yet again a metaphor for spirit. So we say he was anointed with the oil of gladness beyond his brothers. That's a linear thing, like using God's name, Yahweh or Yuho or whatever the heck you want to call him. Whatever you want to call him is okay, because he ain't none of those. And he was anointed with the Spirit above the rest of us humans. As soon as the child received this from the Spirit, it glorified the Holy Spirit and perfect forethought. So the first thing he did is glorified the Holy Spirit, which we're supposed to be like filled with. Actually, that's just supposed to be for us a metaphor of being filled with the light. You are filled with the light of God. You are filled with the Holy Spirit. And if they give you the false interpretation of that, then you now have just been sucker punched from what reality is. And perfect forethought. Do you know perfect forethought has a concept of not forgetting or not missing anything? Everything that's going to happen is known in perfect forethought before it happens. Could you imagine how our world would change if everything and the reactions of what we're fixing to do, what that would mean a day, a week, 10 years from now? How many people do you think that if they really had forethought about the things that they did in their life, they might have stopped and at least second guessed themselves and said, I don't want to go there because it's not going to hurt me today and it's not going to hurt me tomorrow. But 10 years down the road, this is going to come back on me, and it's going to be because I did not have forethought about what this action I'm about to take is going to do to me. Somebody ought to be thankful. Some of you have been living your whole life with no thought. And that's not to put anybody down. I would say we all have been living because why? Because we were not ever taught that we have some things that we can access in the spirit realm that we have no knowledge of. There's a few we find that did have. We see a psychic on television and they read things like they're reading a book. How did they do that? Because it comes from the perfect Spirit. And so because of her, it had come forth. The child asked to be given a mind as a companion to work with. What did they tell you? That the child had been given something in the garden as his helper. Any of you understand what all of that means? The woman is typically conceived as the left side of the brain. And Yeshua was supernatural, he divine, but he lacked something, and he needed that, and that was his woman, his mind. It's really crazy how it works. And so the child asked to be given mind, a helper, as a companion to work with. Is that not the perfect definition of what a helper is? A companion to work with. I need a companion to work with, Father. He says, okay, I'll give you a helper. And the Spirit consented. It was all pleasurable to Source in the Spirit that we have that. That's why the reality of our duality, that we are all both man and female. That's why it makes no difference on whatever incarnation you're in, whether you're male or female. You're the same spirit no matter which you are physically. It makes no difference. When you get out of our bodies or who we are. So he was given this companion, and the Spirit consented. When the invisible Spirit consented, mind appeared and stood by the anointed and glorified the Spirit in Barbello. All of these beings came into existence in silence. Where will you find Source? In the silence. Why do you have to meditate to find God? Because of the silence. Why? Because God is silent, and God sees and hears you secretly in silence, and then he moves outwardly so that it manifests that he saw you. And if you begin to hear what I'm saying right now, that is the revelation and the revolution that every human will experience if they ever begin to walk in fullness. That all of this stuff isn't optional. It's okay. You can stay in your human carnal self thinking you know how everything works. But if you want to find out the true answers with forethought and foreknowledge, you might ought to begin to look inside secretly and look for a connection with Source, who only comes together in silence. That's why all meditation is about silence. It is a way to access your brain, your seat of God, which is the right side of your brain. Mother is on the left side. They don't sit separate, although they're separate. That's why we have two lobes. And so mind wished to create something by means of the word of the invisible Spirit. The mind wished to. You remember when I started with the Kabbalion, one of the first statements they tell you when we started reading that was this, that everything is mine. I'm pretty sure maybe the Kabbalions didn't read the Nag Hammadi text. Or did they? Or was all of this so ancient that no matter where you go, you're going to inevitably, if you get away from an organized religion, you're going to find the truth. And that's the closer, I believe. And so mind wished to create something by means of the word of the invisible Spirit. It will become a reality and appeared with mind and the light, glorifying it. Word followed will. There's a beautiful little concept for us. What you will is what you speak. And so that's pretty huge. You might think that it's what happens to you comes from what you say, and it's not. It actually is what you think is what manifests, not what you say. I know that's hard for some of you. That's why there's so many people out there saying that and can we hurt ourselves with words? No. We hurt ourselves with willful words that come out of a unforeknowledged mind. So it happens in the will. It happens in the mind. How it manifests in front of humans is the things that we say. But it was actually happening a long time before we ever spoke the words. Because it's coming from your will. You can will great and wonderful things and watch them manifest. Or you can say the kindest words and that you're going to live forever and everything is great, and it all be a bunch of BS because inside of you, that's not your will. That's not what you believe. And so actually, all that does is it exposes that in many situations, you're nothing but a liar, and you're lying to yourself. Which I've told you for some time is our worst enemy. So the mind wished to create something by means of the word of the invisible spirit. Its will became a reality and appeared. And that's just such a huge blessing for us to have that. Its will became a reality and appeared. Do you know that that's almost a perfect definition of the word that is used in modern psychology and spiritualism of manifestation? To the T. You want to know how to manifest? All you have to do is look at yourself and you can see your total perfect manifestation right now. And if the picture doesn't look like your mind wants it to look, then you have to change your will. Your words will change with what your will is, but you can be assured you don't have to say a word to be manifesting horrible things in your life. Because God hears in silence. He hears your thoughts. And so you're over here prophesying, speaking in tongues like you're something spiritual, and inside you're a vile thing, and you don't understand why everything's against you. It's because that's your will. And so the Holy Spirit brought the divine self-centered child of himself and Barbello to perfection, so that the child might stand before the great invisible Virgin Spirit as the divine self-generated, the anointed who honored the Spirit with loud acclaim. The child came forth through forethought. So how did it manifest? By the will. And when you begin to understand the concept of the will explained in the context of source, you begin to see that he simply has a thought, and it is. Can I give you another little secret? You have a thought, and it is. You are him in that fact. So whether you like what's going on and what's happening and what's manifesting, either way, whether you do or don't, it's still coming from your thoughts. The child came forth through forethought. The invisible Virgin Spirit set the true divine self-generated over everything and caused all authority and the truth within to be subject to it, so that the child might understand everything. The one called by a name greater than every name. So if you really listen to this with your heart, there's no question that we would say that this is talking about Jesus. And that's okay if you understand in your mind that we're not talking about the physical human. Let's say the true Yeshua isn't the body. And when you begin to understand that, if you can understand that about him, then you can also begin to understand that about yourself. So the invisible Virgin Spirit set the true divine self-generated over everything and caused all authority and the truth within to be subject to it all, so that the child might understand everything. The one called by a name greater than every name, for that name will be told to those who are worthy of it. And that should leave you with a question in your mind. So I guess next week we'll pick up in the next section, because it gets into your will and your thought and your life. The four luminaries. So while I know this is very deep and maybe difficult for some, because I don't really think that we like to look at our lives and go, well, I did every bit of this. I created all of this. No, we like it a little better that we like to blame everybody else for it. Well, it was their fault. It was my mama's fault. No, it wasn't. You were a divine being a long time before your mother's body conceived you. Do we have to overcome the bad programming that's given to us by our parents and genetics? And there's many other factors that give us that subconscious programming. But the truth of the matter is once you come to consciousness, then everything else that happens from your mind. And that's beautiful. I wish that we could all get that, because I can see in that, dear one, how powerful and how great and how mighty and how wonderful we could live lives, and how much peace we could have, and all the things manifesting. If the world really was what you wished it was or what you wanted it to be, would that be wonderful to you? If it really was great and you could walk at the level and walk in the peace and not have the shame and not have the bondage and not have the discouragement, because none of those things matter, because you were at place with your helper, your mind, your spirit, and your forethought. How many problems have we had in our lives we might have stopped if we had the gift of forethought? How many times might you have told yourself, no, I'm not going to do that, because if I do that, I know what's going to come out of that. And so what do? We do it anyways, and then we like to blame somebody. It's like the guy who goes and buys a new car and he knows he really can't. In fact, he has to lie on the bank paper about how much money he makes. He gets the new car, and his source is telling him in his mind, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And the guy goes and gets it, and then 3 months later he loses the car, loses all the money he spent, and who's the first person he blames for it? It's the banker. The banker had nothing to do with it. I think it would benefit all of us if we would begin to dare to look. We're not bad. We're not horrible. We might do wrong things, and I'll certainly be the first to say that that's true, not of y'all, of myself. But I'm also going to say this to you. That doesn't stop Source from loving us. It doesn't stop Source from being desirous for us to change our will. I've said it in the past, and I certainly didn't have the knowledge that I have now. But all of the fakeness that's going on in this world in the spiritual realms has nothing to do with anything. What is spiritual is your will. And what you choose to do with that determines who and what you are. So, shalom to each and every one of you. We're going to take about 10 minutes here and come back and hopefully bless you with some music. I hope that you hear the spirit words in these songs. Some of you may know the song and you may want to sing the secular words, and that's okay. We have struggles here amongst us sometimes of doing the same. And it's all right. Source knows what's inside of us. Shalom again. every one of you. I hope that in the middle of all of this that it will actually help you to find a greater peace or understanding of why the world oftentimes doesn't make any sense. there's so much false that we live in that in our belief system, whatever that might have been maybe in the past, or maybe it still is our reality. But the question that we really should be seeking for, the answer for the question, is this reality? And so when we begin to do that, source so lovingly and so kind always brings truth. I could count the times that I've had a quandary only within a few days of receiving an answer, whether it be he sent it through someone or through something, but it'll always be the answer will come. And I think that's one of the facets of his love. You know, whether you call it love or don't call it love, the principle that Yahusha taught is that no one who doesn't desire something will ever get it. You can have a thought process and think you want to know God, but he says the only way you'll ever find out who he is by seeking. There's a difference between you want something and you are seeking for something. And so that's why lots of people get disgruntled and dismayed when spirituality doesn't work for them. And the truth is it actually just is revealing that they didn't really want it anyway. Because if they did, they would have never quit. They would have continued on, and the source responds to that. And so, the truth of the matter is the name of this next song. Whether we know it or whether we don't, he is real.
Trust him and see he's got all the power you need. Trust him.
he is infinitely more real than we at this point have a conception. The beauty of his realness is that he's going to continue to be real, so we all have time, if we will choose to make that choice, that decision, to begin to seek for what truth really is and what source really is. He is speaking. I've heard people in the past, and many times we diagnose God isn't speaking with "I'm not listening." And so we have to make sure that we focus on getting our part. If you have true faith without doubt in source, then there's no reason to think about what he's doing. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. That only then frees us up to only need to focus on what we're doing. What are you doing? What are you willing in your mind? What are you creating that you don't have a clue about, that you're the one that's causing this? And we often run from that aspect. I watch spiritual shifts and changes in people almost instantaneous when those words come out, because they refuse to accept responsibility for them. And it's a very hard thing in our society, because we've been so brainwashed that it isn't our fault, that it's someone else's. And unfortunately, that's not going to cut it very well with source. What that means, I don't know. Yahusha said many things that make me have some questions about what that really means and what really everything at the end looks like. So, but that's another story. So the next song we're going to do for you speaks about this, and you could change the title of this song and say, "You are serving someone, whether you know it or not." The only question, the only decision, the only will power that you have available is to make the choice about what you're serving. Got to serve somebody.
Maybe an ambassador to England, old friends. May like to gamble, might like to dance. Maybe the heavyweight champion of the world. Maybe his social life with a long string of pearls. But you got to believe somebody. Believe somebody. You got to believe somebody. Believe somebody. Maybe the devil Baby, a construction worker working on a home. Might live in a mansion, might live in a dome, might own guns, might even own a tank. Maybe someone's landlord, might even own a bank. But you got to serve somebody.
Serve somebody.
You got to serve somebody.
Serve somebody.
Maybe the devil, maybe his father, but you got to serve somebody. Maybe a preacher with your spiritual pride. Maybe a councilman taking bribes on the side. Working in a barber shop, may know how to cut hair. Maybe someone's mistress, maybe someone's heir. But you got to believe somebody.
Believe somebody.
You got to believe somebody.
Believe somebody.
Maybe the devil, maybe the father, but you got to believe somebody. Might like to wear cotton, might like to wear silk,
Oh yeah.
might like to drink whiskey, might like to drink milk,
Yes, please.
might like to eat caviar,
Oh.
might like to eat bread,
Well.
sleeping on the floor, or even in a king size bed. But you got to trust somebody.
Trust somebody.
You got to trust somebody.
Trust somebody.
Maybe the devil, maybe the father, but you got to trust somebody. Well, you can call me Terry.
Terry.
You can call me Timmy.
Jimmy.
You can call me Bobby.
Bobby.
You can call me Zimmy.
Jimmy.
You can call me RJ.
RJ.
You can call me Ray.
Ray.
You can call me anything, no matter what you say. You got to love somebody.
Love somebody.
You got to love somebody.
Love somebody.
Maybe the devil, maybe the father, but you got to love somebody. Believe somebody. Trust somebody. Love somebody. Serve somebody. Maybe the devil, maybe his father, but you got to serve somebody.
Serve somebody. What an amazing concept that all of us have to function in, and actually all of us are functioning in that. We're all serving something. The beauty is the free will that Source gives us is even if we find that we are serving the wrong thing, then we can change our will, we can change our thoughts, and we can align ourselves. How beautiful it is. He's given us 1,000 ways to find mercy for him, and all of them start and hinge and end with us. And so it's wonderful that we do let people oftentimes control our lives. But the only reason we do that is because we chose to do that, because we don't have to. We do have the ability profoundly inside of us that maybe we just haven't yet experienced. For some have, but that stops all of that. And so what it really tells us is that there is power in this life. And that's the name of the next song, Power in My Life.
I see sports spirit is arising. I have no fear in life today.
flow in and us, and that is the flow, the in and the out. The light that comes in illuminates us, and the light that goes out illuminates others. And so it's like putting a self-watering system in your garden. Source had forethought to know that not only were we going to need to be watered, but those around us would need to be watered as well. And he's all about growing. He always has been about growing. So, you know, he has a will. It's real funny that concept of the term will. We often don't think that. Most people would respond with, "Oh well, I don't will that." Well, and I realize that we all probably at least a little bit feel that way. But the reality of it is when and if we begin to understand that we really are infinitely more powerful, infinitely more creative than what we maybe know. Maybe it's been hidden. For some, it was beat out of kids by their parents. For others, it was glorified, you know. But we are creative beings, and we don't really have a choice. If we desire to create depression and discouragement and sadness, then that's what you will. It will come completely out of your mind, and it will come to you and manifest. Maybe if you're one of those people, maybe you need a word of encouragement today. I would dare you, if you are one of those, because I certainly have been one of those many times. And what I've begun to find out is that when I set my intent to not experience that, people react differently. I'm not quite perfected to where I live in this all the time, but I can tell you I've done it enough in the last 6 months with the people around me to know that it works, and it is the pattern. It's up to us, once we find the truth, then to practice it enough until we get good at it. And so that simply means that no matter where you're at, there's more for you to go. And so all that this is about this next song. The name of the song is called His Will. And it has to do with us submitting to what it is that He's wanted for us. His will. Leave it all behind. Leave it all behind. Leave it all behind. Leave it all behind. His word's what we need. We keep on searching. Without love's light, we're doomed for certain. When your soul's dry and empty, and you can't find a remedy, submit to His will. You can spend your whole life chasing what's missing, empty inside. It just ain't gonna listen. Sin doesn't satisfy, and the world leaves you high and dry. Submit to His will. All who thirst will thirst no more. All who search will find what their soul longs for. World will try, but it can never feel. Leave it all behind. Submit to His will. So bring Him your heart, matter how broken. Come as you are, when your last prayer is spoken. Rest in His arms a while. You'll feel the change, my child. Submit to world will try, but it can never be old. Leave it all behind. And now if you're full of love beyond measure, then your joy ought to flow like a stream in the desert. Soon all the world will see living water is found in He. Submit to His will. All who thirst will thirst no more. All who search will find what their soul longs for. The world will try, but it can never be old. Leave it all behind. Submit to His will. Leave it all behind. Submit to His will. Leave it all behind. Submit to His will. Shalom.
All right. Well, I hope you guys are feeling blessed, and I do understand that some of the things we're broaching are so huge compared to all that we've learned our whole life. You know, I look back at this and I go, well, it took me 45 years to kind of get a picture of what Christianity really was. And then, of course, Source very quickly was already wiping out the reality of what that was. And so I think we all have to give ourselves a little patience. If there is a blessing and a benefit, and there is, to meditation, then that's probably not something that you're just going to go put on a orange Hare Krishna robe and all of a sudden you're going to go sit and quietly contemplate and meditate for 7 hours. And I believe that Source is really, especially at where we might, if you considered where we might be, I would suspect that if you are diligently applying yourself, if you are seeking to put these truths into your life, we know that the scripture tells us that Source knows the circumstances we're in. And so it's a little bit different take, at least in my revelation, of when it says that God knows what we have need of. He knows our weaknesses just as much as he knows our strengths. And he doesn't not love you if you're being rebellious and you don't even attempt to not meditate, but you do. You have a will to choose to do that. And it's not, maybe not even that you're going to hurt yourself. I don't know what it's going to be like at the end for each of us when we die. I only know what the pieces are. But I do know that it is vitally important that we make a relationship in the manner in which he taught Yeshua, and not in the manner that Christianity has taught us. And if you believe that Jesus taught Christianity, well, then I think you're going to be pretty sad when you find out the truth. But so every week I ask myself, okay, I just read this earth-shaking, I think it was less than a chapter that I shared today, and I just read this earth-shaking news about the spark and when life begins, that it's there in the scriptures, and all the other great and mighty things, that the nuances, some of which, would be way too many for me to break out. I would have to, it's already hard enough for me because I want to focus on 3 words that have this massive, profound understanding. And if I do that, a sentence takes me 2 days and 29 sections. And that's just a little difficult for many people to function in that place. But I always like to ask myself, is what Patanjali is teaching us coming from the Vedic experience, thousands of years from India, and then the writings of the Nag Hammadi, which was the priest that possessed those, buried them in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, and prior to Christianity, because Christianity was in the process of destroying all of these ancients. If you knew how much truth they stole from us, you would, you would probably find yourself angry that they went to such extremes to lie to you. And if that is offensive to you, I truly do apologize. I really don't have a desire to make Christians upset or unhappy. But, it's kind of like at the end of the day, you can call an ace a heart, but it's not. And so we have to decide what are you going to believe? What are you going to look for? Even in that song, all those who seek will find. And so if there's a little maybe insight there, maybe you have or maybe you haven't gotten, we all are fulfilling all already. So I want you to stop for just a second, because this could determine a lot of things, benefits and maybe not so beneficial things, if we all find what we're seeking for, then we only have one question to answer for ourselves. What is my will seeking for? And if you don't know that, then there's no telling what you're getting. If you don't know that that's the rule and you keep willing for what you want with no consciousness about what that may do, you may be getting exactly what you're willing for. I see it go on all the time. I know scores, most of my family is manifesting. And so when I listen to people talk about you can manifest this great money, that sounds a whole lot like Kenneth Copeland telling people that if you'll just bring me all your money over here, I'll buy a new airplane and God will be happy with you. We are manifesting what we are willing, whether that's good or bad, has to be determined by us. And so we're going to see that Source wants us to learn how to manifest, but he wants us to learn how to properly manifest the things that are good for us. I would above all things that you prosper and be in good health, all based on how your soul prospers. And so, but it is quite a revelation if you stop for 5 minutes and tell you and remind yourself daily, well, you know, you really are receiving what you're willing inside. And there'd be 1,000 people want to argue that that's not true. That's okay. I'm not going to argue with you, but you can believe that as long as you want to. I'm recognizing how much it is true. And if you're not walking my walk, you don't have a clue about what I'm talking about any more than I know what you're talking about, because I don't have a desire to walk your walk. I have a desire to walk his walk. And so he wants us blessed. He wants us to find love. He wants us to have peace and joy in the Holy Ghost. And those things are never going to change. But it is up to us to choose to walk in them. And so we left off last week in number 6 in chapter 3 of How to Know God. Remember, the purpose of this is all still, this isn't going to be like you you walk in and you sit down and you have a cup of coffee with God. That's not the intention at all. Can we learn in our spiritual enlightened self how to regain the revelation and the relationship that we had at the very beginning that has been stolen from us? And I do believe the answer is unequivocally yes. And that is steps, and that is a process. For all of you out there who aren't constantly recognizing that the process is quite important, the process that we have to function in now is the function that our Creator set out. Those are called eternal laws. They're never going to go away. They function in everything that exists. Even the molecules and the atoms function according to the universal laws. And so in chapter 6 we finished up, we're in aphorism number 7, but I just wanted to sew this into you because it kind of brings this up to date. He says, we must then keep our minds on the form without ornaments. If you remember last week, he was walking us through that first maybe first in your mind, if you're trying to meditate or you're contemplating, maybe first think about God and all the things that are associated with him. And that's just simply because it is very difficult to learn how to control your mind. If you haven't been taught your whole life how to meditate, it's really tough on all of us. It's not easy. And so we focus on things that are a little broader, and as we grow and as we practice and as we seek and as we find, then we'll begin to remove those ornaments that help us have a picture of God or Source, if you would. And so he says, you must then keep your mind on the form without the ornaments. So the focus is to move from all of the things that we can generally see that are God, and we begin to take those ornaments out one at a time, and our vision becomes more focused until we finally get down to there is no external, there is only Source. And then we must meditate upon his oneness with the light form. So literally, you can come to a place, I've experienced this a few times, not as much as I would like, but you will come to a place when it's almost as if your mind will cease to function and you will have nothing but a great, warm, luminous light in front of you. And then lastly, we must let the form vanish and end up, which is what this is all about, focusing on our higher self. This is the first place that maybe some people, if they accomplish this and if they continue, they will accomplish, where they actually encounter their true self for the first time, is when you come into revelation with your higher self. That there is a human that lives inside of you, and I use the term human lightly, but there is a part of you inside of your spirit soul where there's another spirit, and it is the true you that exists there. And I assure you, the true you has no preconceived ideas that have anything to do with your physical form. It's not as if it's not, no, it's just not important. And so many of us have been taught and brainwashed that this thing is who I am. So if you'll stop and think about that, many people tie their medical conditions to who they are. I've been in multiple situations as a pastor where you go to pray for somebody and you hear some of the most carnal things when somebody's laying on a bed about to die. And it's just like, dude, you got so much more to think about than the fact that your old body's falling apart. Mine is too. I don't know about y'all guys, but I'm not as young as I used to be. And so I take my hat off to Sister Frances and the others who are trying to walk in the right light, even after having 60 or 70 years of Christianity. I don't know if you do. If you don't, then I certainly would like to inform you that you truly are an amazement, that you could make that change. Very few people will. And so that is a blessed gift, that's not a curse, even though sometimes the good things bring strife in our life. It's not because they're causing the strife. So then we get to 7. So we must first have a desire to engage with ourselves. And these 3 are more direct aids to experience than the 5 limbs previously described. That is to say, the first 5 limbs of yoga are only a form of training for the aspirant. So all the first stuff of trying to see God as a whole, as much as your mind can allow, and then you start purging away those things that aren't, like maybe you begin to see that God isn't a human. You know, we just read in the Nag Hammadi that God has no form. He's nothing but a light. What does that do to all of the pictures that are painted in your mind of God? He has no form. He's simply light. He's pure energy. And so that is all that was gone on last week, and all that we're here is all valid for us because we all need to be trained. This doesn't need to be taught to a yogi. They've already done this. And so, but for the aspirant, to prepare him for the practice of samyama, or concentration, meditation, and absorption. So once again, it's very much a process, and it's a slow process. Some will do it faster, some can calm themselves, some can find peace faster, some will be more diligently and spend more time, and others will barely do any, and they'll usually be the first ones who say, well, I didn't get anything out of it. Well, you didn't get anything out of it because you didn't put anything into it. And it's not just like a one-off thing, you know. It's like, oh, yeah, well, I walked into the bar and I got me a bottle of Meditate. Sorry, you know, Lone Star can't help you. And so, but it is a way, a vehicle, a means just like our body is a means to carry our spirit around on this earth, that is a vehicle to bring you to a place of enlightenment and also consciousness of your higher self. And so the mind senses have to be purified by the cultivation of ethical virtues. There it pops up again last week and this week. And the whole orgasm, the whole organism, I guess is an orgasm, the whole organism has to be strengthened in order that it may be able to undergo the tremendous experiences that await it. So yet again, exactly what I said. This is a process, friend. If you're on it, just expect to be on this process till the day you die. And if you're like my grandson and you're a very young man in your life, well, that just simply means he has the ability to have possibly more years of functioning in this if he will do the same work that you have to do. If he doesn't, he'll live his whole life and he'll be no more inspired than you. It really does all come down to us and what your will is. I will to have a relationship and a consciousness of God in me. And because of that, my will manifests because I continue to do the things even though they're not always easy, they're not always fun, they're not always pleasing. But if I do them, then I know, because my will not let me down, that I will continue through the process until I reach the place of enlightenment that I desire to reach. And so that's really the total summation of how it really works for you. And so the whole organism has to be strengthened in order that it may be able to undergo the tremendous experience that await it. So if you're not seeing a lot of movement, it's okay. Just keep doing it. Eventually you'll get a piece and it'll change, and then there'll be a piece and it'll change, and then there'll be a piece and it'll change. And before you know it, a year later, you turn around and look back and go, wow, I'm meditating 15 minutes and I'm blown away when I quit meditating, because I feel so much. But this is just the beginning. Even the perfection of samyana is just the beginning. For whenever we are inclined to feel proud of some tiny indication of spiritual growth in ourselves, we shall do well to remember Brahmananda's amazing and sobering words. Spiritual life begins after samadhi. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, long and short, until you find yourself, we're seeking for a spiritual experience. We only have begun when we begin to find the higher self that is the true you. Well, that paints a picture that is more real, but maybe not more tolerable. Most people will never make it to that point. Most people, if they do, will do for a little while and then they'll end up quitting. They don't see any benefit. They don't think it's affecting them. It's not, it's not raining wealth. And then they go put something on YouTube and some guy over here is preaching about like Kenneth Copeland does and telling you that you can manifest millions if you'll just follow their next plan. And by the way, we would like you to attend our seminar at $500 a pop. It's really sad that we would sell the blessings and the gift that Source gives. I don't know of any human who couldn't benefit. I don't think that you probably would have to worry about encountering that with Yeshua. There was more to why he was born at that time. And everywhere he went, he didn't hesitate to help people who had a heart. So, something we could think about very seriously. But even these are not direct aids to the seedless samadhi. The practice of samyana leads to the lower samadhi, but the seedless samadhi, nirvikalpa, demands a further and even more intense spiritual effort. See Chapter 1, Aphorism 51. Nearly everything Patanjali says here on the subject is simply recapitulation. Patanjali now speaks of nirvikalpa. When the vision of the lower samadhi is suppressed by an act of conscious control so that they are no longer any thoughts or visions in the mind, that is the achievement of control of the thought waves of the mind. When this suppression of thought waves becomes continuous, the mind's flow is calm. When all mental distractions disappear and the mind becomes one-pointed, it enters the state called samadhi. And that is really just the beginning. That's pretty huge. I don't know about you, it makes me feel a little bit convicted. But it's not convicted like I've broken some horrible rule and I'm going to go to hell. It makes me feel convicted because I know that it's me slowing him down, not him slowing me down. I think all of this is how you view it, and it all has to always come back to how it affects you. He loves you. He wants you to experience the best that there is. But once again, it's still up to you to accomplish that. He's provided his part always. That never ceases. The minute that you will make a choice, he's there because he's already been there. So it really is about our will. You know, I used to hear people, oh, she's a self-willed lady. Sometimes that's the most horrible thing a human can be proud of. And so the mind becomes one-pointed when similar thought waves arise in succession without any gaps between them. It has been said that if the mind can be made to flow uninterruptedly towards the same object for 12 seconds, this may be called concentration. So look at the standard of that. We think, you know, I hear stories of people meditating for 7 hours, and here we have some of the most wonderful, enlightened people trying to share truth with us, and they say, well, how about you just focus on getting 12 seconds? That's concentration. We don't even have that discipline in our society on many levels, friends. Our children have no ability to control their minds. They just go with whatever. Oh, okay, everybody says that there's more than one gender or more than two genders, so I'll believe that, and oh, now there's 29 genders. It's just simply weak-mindedness. And so when we can learn when our minds can be made to uninterruptedly toward the same object for 12 seconds, this may be called concentration. If the mind can continue in that concentration for 12 times 12 seconds, 2 minutes and 24 seconds, this may be called meditation. So I've been telling you that I'm quite sure most of us don't have a really clear picture of what it is that is being spoken of. If Yahusha did, and I don't know that he did, he might have went up on that hill and he did 24 times 24 seconds, and it still doesn't matter. He still moved into a place of total focus, and there was effect. And so 2 minutes and 24 seconds, this may be called meditation. If the mind can continue in this meditation for 12 times 2 minutes and 24 seconds, 28 minutes and 48 seconds, this will be the lower samadhi. That's how we're not talking hours. And maybe some of you who are trying to set a standard, maybe you really do want to do good. I don't doubt that that's true. But maybe you're trying to set a record, and I'm so thankful for this because it helps to give us a passage. If you notice, he's by virtue teaching us a process. Wherever you're at, you don't have to stay there, and wherever you're at, there's further to go, but you have to go in little bitty steps. We are children spiritually, and we have to go through the learning processes that children do. That's why he said, you must come to me like little children. And so, if the mind can continue in that meditation for 12 times 2 minutes, 24 seconds, 28 minutes and 48 seconds, this will be the lower samadhi. And if the lower samadhi can be maintained for 12 times that period, 5 hours, 45 minutes, and 36 seconds, this will lead to a nirvikalpa samadhi. Now, I admit that it's going to be work to get to a nirvikalpa samadhi. First off, most people in our society don't have 5 hours to just sit there and do nothing. That's the way some people would say it. Truth is you accomplish more in that time, how much ever time it is, than any other time of the day as far as spiritual growth. And so, in this state, it passes beyond the three kinds of changes which take place in subtle or gross matter and in the organs: change of form, change of time, change of condition. Vivekananda takes as an example a lump of gold. Change of form occurs when the gold is made first into a bracelet and then into an earring. Change of time occurs as it gets older. Change of condition occurs when the bright gold becomes dull or wears thin. Similar changes occur in subtle matter and in the thought waves of the mind. The thought waves may be of different kinds, may refer to different periods of time, and may vary in intensity. And every one of us are going through these. It's just a matter of where we are at whatever given time we take a look at. But the mind is in the state of samadhi, is beyond all three kinds of changes. So a compound object has attributes and is subject to change, either past, present, or yet to be manifested. The succession of these changes is the cause of manifold evolution or many evolutions. Every object within the realm of differentiated matter has attributes and is a compound object. Since it is made of the three gunas in varying combinations, as has already been explained way back in chapter 1, the attributes of an object vary and change according to the action of the gunas and the constitution of the samkaras. Any object can change into any other object. Therefore, the enlightened yogi sees no essential difference between a piece of gold and a lump of mud. Hence, he acquires a complete dispassion towards the objects of the phenomenal world. By making samyana on the three kinds of changes, one obtains knowledge of the past and the future. Patanjali now begins to describe the various occult powers and the methods by which they are acquired. All authorities, including Patanjali himself, regard occult powers as the greatest stumbling blocks on the path to truth. Heaps of rubbish, Sri Ramakrishna calls them. Buddha told his disciples very definitely never to put their faith in miracles, but to see truth in the eternal principles. And I hate to tell you, dear friends, but the mass majority of people in the spiritual movement today are doing just the opposite. If you can have a story about how you had some spiritual thing go on, then that supposedly means something. If you look at it in the form of source is going, well, why haven't you been having that all along? And just so you know, you're not the only monkey in the tree. Everyone is supposed to have these. So what makes you any different than somebody else? Doesn't mean you're more spiritual because you have a spiritual revelation of some kind. It might mean that you have received a kind gift of spiritual revelation, and that is to be valued, but never to be used as spiritual pride, as somehow I'm better than you because I had a vision. I've had lots of those. I have no conscious effort at all that I'm in any way any better. I wonder why everybody's not functioning and why I'm not functioning more. And so he calls them just heaps of rubbish. Sri Ramakrishna calls them. Buddha told his disciples very definitely never to put their faith in miracles, but to see truth in the eternal principles. And I want you to see something here. That plays out in this concept plays out in why the Bible glorifies Jesus as being all of the things that he was said to be. Why is it that his only form of spirituality is that he healed people? It wasn't him healing people that changed people's lives. It was the words that he spoke that changed their lives. Did he help some? If you were blind or if you were a leper and he heals you, does that help you? Yes, but it only helps you to the point of being healed from that anomaly. It doesn't make you spiritual. You still have to do that yourself. And we like this story that Jesus came and he healed them and he made them all perfect and none of them needed to seek after that. And if you believe that rubbish, you know, shame on you. Because it's just simply not the truth. It wasn't the healed. It doesn't matter. If you die with cancer, wonderful. You died with cancer. That didn't change a thing about your spiritual journey. And so Christ spoke sharply against those who seek for a sign. But I'll tell you, a wicked and a perverse generation looks for a sign. I've always pondered that. I've read that. I've read those verses, Matthew, hundreds of times. And I've always pondered why it was that it seemed like Yeshua was condemning all of these people because they wanted to see. I mean, he's the same guy who told us that if we really had a clue, which we don't, of who we really are, which we don't, and what we really, the power we really possess, we could literally look at physical things and by our mind alone make those things do whatever we command them. We all, every single human on this earth possesses that power. But you don't access that power any other way than the way that we're talking here. So do you know why, dear one? You don't see any supernatural healings going on? There's why. Everybody's seeking after a sign. Everybody wants to be like Paul and run downstairs and jump on the dead man. Well, Paul did that, but Paul did that for the benefit of the dead man. Didn't benefit him a thing. Everybody around him wasn't enamored because there were other enlightened people that lived at that time that were also doing miracles. So we think this is a miracle, and the sad fact is it's supposed to be the norm. And so Christ spoke sharply against those who seek for a sign, and it is unfortunate that his strictures were not taken more seriously to heart by his followers, and I agree fully with that. The only people that are the main people that don't live by the teachings of Yeshua are Christians. They don't believe half of what he said. And so they change what it means, and all of a sudden, oh, now I can believe that. Occult powers do, however, exist, and Patanjali, in his comprehensive treatise on yoga psychology, obviously cannot ignore them. We translate the aphorisms which follow for the sake of completeness, but we do so with a minimum of technical explanation. The sincere spiritual aspirant can have very little concern with such matters. So, once again, I hope that you get the picture. All of those things are not what is important. What is important is you. What is important to source is you. Not what you might be able to do or not to do, because no matter what it is, it all came from him anyways. And so they don't get into that, explain that much, because that's really not what's important. Does it come out of that? Yes. I think it's possible Yeshua really did say that if you guys really had any revelation about who you really are, you can do the same things I do and even more than that. But I don't believe for a minute that he was telling all of Christianity that you're going to be people walking around and your shadow is going to heal, because it's not. It's not working. If it was, that would be a truth. It's not working. I don't see anybody walking around healing people from their shadow. Those people were spiritual. We are not. Not that we can't be, but we haven't arrived there yet. Speaking in tongues does not heal somebody. Dancing like a chicken in the aisles of a church to impress some fake people around you doesn't change anybody's life. And so at some point we have to quit playing the game and begin to desire the truth. And that's why Truth Seeker is such a big thing for me. And so in the West, these powers are seldom exhibited, as I just stated, and are therefore the object of a good deal of skepticism. Yet they are all within each one of us and could be developed through constant practice. Thank you, Patanjali. Because that's exactly what I just said to you guys a few minutes ago. We all have the power. It's just more and more every day. It's just boggling my mind as to how bad we really have been abused. If anybody needs reparations, humans should receive reparations from Christianity for the damage they've done. And I know maybe if you're a Christian, you think that I'm downing them. I'm not. But the ideology is as corrupt as it comes. And so Western man has made a different choice. He has preferred to concentrate on the production of mechanical rather than psychological powers. And so instead of telepathy, we have the telephone. Instead of levitation, we have the helicopter. And instead of clairvoyance, we have television. We may regret the materialism that is expressed by such a choice, but perhaps it is the lesser of two evils. A community of degenerated yogis using psychic powers for business and political ends would be even more unpleasant to live in than our own atom-wielding world. So let us stop hankering about the psychic powers and turn back to the true path towards spiritual growth, remembering Patanjali's warning. They are powers in the world state, but they are obstacles to samadhi. And so by making samyana on the sound of a word, one's perception of its meaning, one's perception of its reaction to it, three things which are ordinarily confused. One obtains understanding of all sounds uttered by living beings. Ordinarily, we are aware of no distinction between hearing the sound of a word and understanding what it means, and reacting in one way or another to the information it contains. If someone shouts fire, we jump to our feet in an instant, but the yogi is able to separate these three functions by making this samyana. He can understand foreign languages and the sounds made by all kinds of animals. By making samyana on previous thought waves, one obtains knowledge of one's past lives. When a thought wave subsides, it remains within your mind in a minute, in a minute, subtle form. Therefore, it can be retrieved as a memory. And this memory can be made to extend backwards into previous incarnations. So here's what, with all that he said about us being weak and unknowledgeable because it's been hidden from us. The truth of the matter is that we, by our minds and our abilities that we have practiced, we should be able to access our past lives without ever having somebody to help us. Now, is it beneficial if there is someone who is focused on learning this, and you're not going to be a hypnotist, doing quantum hypnotism if you haven't practiced and spent a lot of time learning how to do so? So when Dolores did that to find Saudi, which was one of 24,000 people that she gave readings to in her lifetime, she found one that she arrived at that place. But we are all have the capability, once again, of doing that on our own by ourselves. That's why Edgar Casey could go lay on his couch and could tell you things from thousands of years ago because he learned it himself. It wasn't because somebody else was doing it or helping him or guiding him, if you would. And so, being a little bit of a pragmatist, I wonder how wonderful, how amazing might our lives be if we could access the supernatural spiritual realm on our own, in our own environments, at our own will, and at our own time. And the answer is can we? Unequivocally, yes. Will we? Is the question. But if you choose to, and if you set your intention and your will to that direction, I tell you, the universe will not withhold it from you. I'm excited about what's coming. This is going to be one of the greatest times humanity has existed on this earth. And so, by making samyana on previous thought waves, one obtains knowledge of one's past lives. When a thought wave subsides, it remains within the mind in a minute, subtle form. Therefore, it can be revived as a memory, and this memory can be made to extend backwards into previous incarnations. By making samyana on the distinguishing marks of another man's body, one obtains knowledge of the nature of his mind. That's why we can have readings. But not of its contents, because this is not the object of samyana. In order to know the contents of another's mind, the yoga would have to make a second samyana on the heart. Aphorism 35 of this chapter. If one makes samyana on the form of one's body, obstructing its perceptibility and separating its power of manifestation from the eyes of the beholder, then one's body becomes invisible. Thus also its sounds cease to be heard. In other words, it is possible for the yogi, while remaining present in a room, to obstruct the outward manifestation of his body in such a way that the senses of other people will be unable to detect it. The reality behind the outward manifestation will remain, but since this reality cannot be detected by the gross sense organs of others, the yogi will become unseen, unheard, unfelt, and so on. There's so much more to where we live and what we are. It's not even funny. But the beautiful news to me is that we are in a process of learning. Today is another one of those pieces of the process, whether you recognize it or not. And it won't be for everybody, but it will be for everybody who listens. And so by making samyana on two kinds of karma, that which will soon bear fruit and that which will not bear fruit until later, or by recognizing the portents of death, a yogi may know the exact time of his separation from the body. And there's really a lot more about karma than it's really infinitely deeper than what we think it is. And especially when anything that you take and you begin to extend it backwards in lives that the spirit has been in, but bodies that are different. And then when you do so about what might be in the future, those are pretty crazy. Well, I think it is, Dave. Dave asked a question because, you know, I've stated it several times that it's always blown me away that, you know, Abraham would sit on his bed, call his whole family to him, and he goes, "Look, guys, I'm about to die. Okay, it's all cool. I'm not worried. Look, I'm not upset. I want you to take this, the only thing that matters to them before they check out of their body is that they might make sure and remind their children that you take this that I showed you and you give it to everybody everywhere you go." That's crazy. But it wasn't just Abraham that did that. In fact, most of the patriarchs did so. Just as you listen to how matter-of-factly Saudi says, "Oh, well, we all knew." Isn't that crazy? Does any of that blow you guys away like it does me? I'm like, man, we're so twisted and scared of so much stuff that those people walked around in freedom. "Oh, I'm going to die. So what? It's just the body's dying. I'll see you guys next month." I mean, it really is. It's very sad, the damage they've done to us, because we live our lives in fear. That none of this crap matters. It makes no difference. It's in the scheme of things, this is not going to make any difference. What is going to make any difference is what do we, the true us, what do we accomplish while we're here? Not what did this body do. Being a millionaire, being a Donald Trump does not make you any more spiritual. I believe he was probably brought into the life he was, and he's in the position that he's in right now, and it's no different than Saudi saying that Yahusha came to do something and everyone's known it since he was a child. What if we lived our lives with that knowledge? Would it free us? Would it cause us to be bolder when maybe in times past we were timid and we shut our mouth and we didn't say anything, and we thought that was good because when I do say something then I get jumped on? And I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that go into this concept and what's been robbed from us. And so by making samyani on two kinds of karma, that which will soon bear fruit and that which will not bear fruit until later. So it's something that's actually done intentionally. He didn't deal, if you remember, there were three basic forms of karma, and he didn't worry about the present karma because I'm causing that to happen right now. But he did worry about the karma he had done in the past and taken care of that, and he dang sure wanted to focus on the karma that the outcome of what he's doing right this minute, which becomes the future, becomes the past in a millisecond. And so, portents of death include various physical and psychical phenomena, together with visions of supernatural beings. It's not uncommon for people. It's not uncommon for after somebody passes. Maybe some of you have been some that have had that, where you saw your grandmother died, or maybe you had a vision that she was going to die and you were a child and you woke up and you had this horrible dream, and then all of a sudden the phone rings and your mom answers it at 3 o'clock in the morning and they find out your grandmother just had a heart attack and passed away, or whatever the case may be. Because it really doesn't matter who the person is. It's what went on in the spirit realm that brought that child to be able to receive that message of something that just a few minutes later manifested. And we all have that power. And so, and then together with visions of supernatural beings. Have some of y'all had those? Some of you dream a lot more probably than others. Some of your minds are more active than others. I don't manifest all of these things. Sometimes I manifest them in the daylight, while I'm sitting in a car. It is better not to be too explicit here, lest the reader should alarm himself unduly. Hindus believe that it is very important to know the exact hour of one's death in advance, because the thoughts one is thinking at that moment will to some degree determine the nature of one's afterlife. It's very clear for us to know what Yeshua's state of mind was hours before. What was his will? His will was, I do the will of my Father. That is my will, is to do the will of my Father. And I was sent to do this. Now we find from Saudi, if you take the Bible's narrative and you put it with Saudi's, now he says, I've known my whole life that I was going to die, and you think that I'm somehow going to all of a sudden double under and I'm going to run? I was prepared for this, because he knew it had nothing to do with the body, which is the picture why Yeshua had to live on this earth. We had to see your body means nothing. How many people do I know that saw that? 0. They all had the same picture because they all came out of the same Christianity. And it never was about teaching you that Yeshua was a mystic, and the message he was saying to you is that once your spirit leaves your body's dead, but your spirit's still alive. See, I'm going to be over here, and I'm going to be with my guys again in 2 months. What does that mean? That means he wasn't dead. And he was only dead if you deem the body to be who we are. And it's not. For many of you, you were pre-programmed to come into this life and hurt. There's always a test. There's always a learning. All humans hurt, so we know that all humans do. But there are humans who come in who have anomalies. And I've often pondered how that is and why God doesn't heal those if he's such a kind and loving God. How could he let people go through their life suffering and struggling? And now I understand why. Because the body means nothing. If you have to suffer a few minutes in eternal time here to learn a lesson, you could ask the question, would you? Yeshua said, I'm going to come into the world and I'm going to hurt, and that's going to be okay with me, and I have every conscience of it already. So it fits with exactly what he's saying. It is better not to be explicit because I don't want to alarm you. Hindus believe that it is very important to know the exact hour of one's death in advance because the thoughts one is thinking at the moment will to some degree determine the nature of one's afterlife. So what if we just live our lives constantly and controlled? Do you not believe that that would make your life better? I know that none of us are here, and we may not be here. I mean, there might, anybody who hears this message or any other, they may not achieve this stuff for 15 years. What difference does it make? What difference does it make? Yeah, if you have a purpose, and one of the purposes, we do have purposes, but one of those purposes is for us to meet God, meet our higher self. And so by making samyana on friendliness, compassion, etc., one develops the powers of these qualities. The reference here is to Aphorism 33 of chapter 1. Friendliness toward the happy, compassion for the unhappy, and delight in the virtuous. I would have you to look at something, though, and notice, if you would, pray tell for just a second, what is missing out of those 3 statements? Because for that to be balanced, there should be 4 statements, not 3. What's missing out of those 3 statements? What statement should go with that? Do you see what it is? Because if you see what it is, then you will see a profound truth here. Okay. Friendliness towards the happy. Compassion for the unhappy. Well, I don't think that we've all done very well, probably, in every situation. Because don't we then have to define what unhappy means? Does all the money in the world make you happy? So then we should have compassion on who? Those that are unhappy. How can we find out if they're unhappy if we don't know? We have to hear, we have to be in a place where they can tell us, because the only way we find out about each other inside is when people talk. That's why people don't want to talk, because they don't want to reveal what's really in them. I know you guys may not believe this, but this is typical psychology, true psychology. Why do people not talk and express their feelings, even though the Bible commands us that you'll never get any healing? James and Jude were right on the money with every statement they made, friends. They were just as mystical as Yeshua was. Those aren't literal concepts, they are mystical concepts. And so, friendly towards the happy, compassion for the unhappy, and he used the term unhappy intentionally, delight in the virtuous. So we are to delight in the good. And if you look at those 3, the first 2 are opposites. Okay? And then the second one doesn't have an opposite. And we know that everything from the Kabbalion is just a place on a scale of a specific thing. So if we are talking, let's say in this one, if we are talking about good things, then we immediately know in our minds that if we're talking about the timeline of good things, then what's the opposite end of that, Mike? Bad things. So we have bad things, and it's funny that he intentionally took that out to prick your mind to there is something that you haven't looked at. If we are to delight in virtuous, guess what by virtue that also says? It says you are not to have delight in people who do unvirtuous things. Sometimes we think it's okay for people to do wrong. And friend, I'm sorry to tell you, it's not okay for people to do wrong. Seems to be some people get lost and wander with this whole thing and this whole lack of a concept of hell. Hell for a lot of people is an easy way to have this end of the spectrum or this end. You either go to hell and you scream and wail and you burn for eternity, or you go over here and it's all wedded bliss. It's nothing but a metaphor, but it is a metaphor people were attracted to, and then they held on to it because it made it easy. Well, I don't want to go to the bad place. I can't tell you how many people that came in my office countering and were scared to death of going to hell because they didn't want to go. They didn't care about how they behaved or why they would go to hell. They just didn't want to go to hell. So no, hey, Pastor, I don't want to go to hell. Okay, well, enough with that. But now I want to tell you what I'm doing that's going to make me go to hell. Which was really the only way you can fix the problem, is when you're honest enough with what the problem is in the first place. And many people make a lot of false diagnoses. And so, friendliness towards the happy, the good side, friendliness towards the happy, compassion to the unhappy, the opposite end. Delight in the virtuous, and undelight in the unvirtuous. So when you see all the stuff that's going on, firebombing cars and all of this nonsense, and I know that it's going to come up even more so, that our president will be called some horrible beast because he threw people in prison for 20 years, though the law says that if you do this, you're a terrorist and you deserve 20 years in jail. Why? Because he's just showing his undelight with the unvirtuous acts of people. And there's not a provision in the universal law ever of that. So for all those people who think that we should be so kind and loving, and we should, give them sex changes while they're in prison, and you should pay for that, it's a crock. So the yogi who masters this samyana has the power of giving joy to everyone he meets. And that's the beautiful part of all of this. And relieving him from pain and care. So see, when it's all said and done, all of this stuff is all about you and what you do give out to the world, but it's also about what your world is and what you manifest. And I don't know about you, if we really loved our neighbor like we loved ourselves, we would be manifesting good for ourselves, and in the course of that, we would also know that it was equally important for me to manifest good for the people around me. And that's a different story. So, blessings to each and every one of you guys. I know it's always is. I know that. I love the pieces of this. I'm like this. If you know what an oscilloscope looks like, it does like this. It's a line going across a screen, and it goes like this. And that's about how my life is. Some days I'm as high as it gets, and some days I'm as low as it goes. And that's okay. I would rather, because I used to have a whole lot less of those highs and a whole lot more of those lows. And so I would like to encourage each and every one of you, wherever you are, whether yours is longer or shorter, is really not the issue. Although it is a way that we gauge how successful we're being. But I don't care where you're at. If you've begun the journey, you're further than what you were. So, shalom to each and every one of you. God loves us. He wouldn't have released all of this stuff to us. I know that this has been where I was intended for quite a while now. And I don't understand all that he's said. I don't understand all that he's told me that he will do. But I do know one thing, that if I trust him, he's never failed me. And so, peace to each and every one of you. I hope that you'll take this stuff serious. I can't imagine anything more serious than your spiritual survival. And I hope you'll allow him in. And actually allow yourself out. So, shalom to each and every one of you. We do this together. Heart, centered in your heart. And then we bow to each other. Namaste. We'll be back, source willing, 7 o'clock on Wednesday night. And we don't have a lot more left in this teaching, and I hope it's been a blessing to you. It just absolutely blows me away. It's not huge, but it's the nuances that are so obvious to Saudi and are so unobvious to us. So, shalom and peace to each and every one of you.